The events of May 24, 2022 at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, shook the nation to its core. A lone gunman, just 18 years old, entered the school and opened fire. He took the lives of 19 young children and 2 teachers. The tragedy left a community shattered, and a nation grappling with grief and anger. The Uvalde shooting was, sadly, not an isolated incident. It was another in a long line of mass shootings that have plagued the United States. This shooting, however, felt different for many. The age of the victims, the innocence of the setting, and the sheer scale of the loss amplified the nation's existing anxieties about gun violence. In the wake of the tragedy, the usual questions resurfaced. How could this happen again? What could have been done to prevent it? As the investigation unfolded, a complex and disturbing picture began to emerge. This picture included the shooter's online activity, his fascination with violent video games, and his exposure to extremist content on social media. The Uvalde shooting, like other mass shootings before it, ignited a debate. This is a debate about the role of various factors in influencing violent behavior. It is a debate that continues to this day. Some people point to the easy availability of firearms in the United States, others focus on the need for better mental health care. And still, others question the influence of violent media. The tragedy in Uvalde brought these issues into sharp focus once again. It underlined the urgent need for a national conversation and for concrete action. The families of the Uvalde victims, overwhelmed by grief and determined to seek justice, filed a lawsuit. Their lawsuit targeted several entities. These entities included the gun manufacturer, the school district, and law enforcement. Notably, the families also sued Meta Platforms Inc., the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, and Activision Blizzard Inc., the makers of the popular video game Call of Duty. The lawsuit against Meta and Activision Blizzard is significant. It represents a growing trend of holding tech and gaming companies accountable for real-world harm. The families allege that these companies bear some responsibility for the shooting. They claim that the shooter was exposed to and influenced by harmful content on their platforms. Specifically, the lawsuit against Meta claims that the company's algorithms promoted extremist content and violent imagery to the shooter. They argue that Facebook and Instagram's algorithms created echo chambers. These echo chambers reinforce the shooter's violent tendencies. The families also allege that Meta failed to adequately moderate its platforms and take down harmful content. The lawsuit against Activision Blizzard focuses on the violent nature of the Call of Duty video game franchise. The families argue that the game desensitized the shooter to violence and provided him with a virtual training ground for his attack. They claim that the realistic depiction of violence, coupled with the game's immersive nature, contributed to the shooter's actions. This argument echoes long-standing concerns about the potential impact of violent video games on young people. The Uvalde family's lawsuit against Meta and Activision Blizzard raises broader societal concerns. These concerns revolve around the influence of social media, video games, and other forms of technology on young people. There is growing concern about the amount of time children and teenagers spend online. There is also concern about the type of content they are exposed to. Social media platforms in particular have come under scrutiny. Critics argue that platforms like Facebook and Instagram can contribute to a range of problems. This includes cyberbullying, body image issues, and increased anxiety and depression. Algorithms designed to keep users engaged can trap them in echo chambers of misinformation and harmful content. The debate surrounding the impact of violent video games is not new. For decades, researchers and policymakers have debated the potential link between video games and aggression. While no conclusive evidence proves that playing violent video games directly causes violent behavior, studies have shown a correlation. Some studies suggest that exposure to violent video games can lead to increased aggression and desensitization to violence. The Uvalde lawsuit highlights the need for a nuanced and informed conversation about these issues. It is important to acknowledge that social media and video games are not inherently bad. In fact, they can have positive effects. Social media can connect people and build communities. Video games can improve cognitive skills and provide entertainment. However, it is crucial to recognize the potential risks and to take steps to mitigate them. Drawing the line: corporate responsibility versus individual action. The Uvalde lawsuit has ignited a debate about corporate responsibility. To what extent are tech companies responsible for the content shared on their platforms? And to what extent are gaming companies responsible for the potential, real-world consequences of their products? These are complex questions with no easy answers. Meta and Activision Blizzard, like other companies in their respective industries, argue that they are not responsible for the actions of their users. They maintain that their platforms are tools that can be used for good or evil. They argue that it is up to individuals to use these tools responsibly. Tech companies often defend themselves by citing the First Amendment. They argue that they are protected from liability for content posted by their users. They emphasize that they are not publishers of this content. However, critics argue that these companies have a moral obligation to prevent the spread of harmful content on their platforms. They point out that these companies have a responsibility to protect their users, especially children and teenagers. The debate over corporate responsibility is likely to continue. It is a complex issue with no easy answers. However, the Uvalde lawsuit serves as a stark reminder of the potential real-world consequences of online content. It also highlights the need for greater accountability and transparency from tech and gaming companies. The road ahead. Potential implications and the future of regulation. The outcome of the Uvalde family's lawsuit against Meta and Activision Blizzard remains to be seen. The case could have far-reaching implications for the tech and gaming industries. It could also influence how these industries are regulated in the future. If the families are successful, it could set a precedent. This precedent could lead to increased scrutiny of tech and gaming companies. It could also lead to more lawsuits holding these companies accountable for the content on their platforms and the potential consequences of their products. The Uvalde tragedy has reignited calls for stricter regulations. Some people advocate for stricter regulations of social media and video games. They argue that more needs to be done to protect children from harmful content. They believe that age verification measures and stricter content moderation policies are necessary. Others caution against government overreach. They argue that censorship and restrictions on free speech are not the answer. They believe that education and parental involvement are crucial. They also emphasize the importance of personal responsibility. The Uvalde lawsuit is a significant development in the ongoing debate about the role of technology in society. It raises important questions about freedom of speech, corporate responsibility, and the impact of media on youth. Regardless of the outcome, the case is likely to have a lasting impact on the tech and gaming industries. It will likely shape the debate about regulation and responsibility for years to come.